This week we'll be using a reveal wheel to make Froyo change to all the colors of the rainbow. I love reveal wheel cards and I've finally gotten around to making this video. It's been in the works for a while and now it's finally ready. There are 6 main things that you'll be needing for this project. The first is the Sweet Friend stamp set by Fawn, as well as the Baked with Love stamp set by Fawn. I'm also going to be using 2 other products by Fawn. I'm going to be using the reveal wheel dies and the stencil that goes with that. I'm also going to be using the Thank You die by Hero Arts and liquid watercolors. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some thick watercolor paper and I'm going to be cutting my reveal wheel out of that. Make sure to use the correct side. Then I'm going to take out my big piece and my little circle and I'm going to cut them both out of thick white cardstock. I'm going to be cutting out 2 of the larger panels as well as another one out of patterned paper. Now we're going to paint our wheel. I've got some pink watercolors, some yellow, and I've got some blue. That way, when I put them all together, they will make the entire rainbow. You can see on the circle how there's kind of an outer indent, and you've really got to be careful not to paint past that line. So first I'm going to just take my pink and then I'm going to outline it and then I'm just going to use water and just make a big wedge out of it. Just be loose and free and make sure there's plenty of water for the paint to move freely. Then while it's still wet, I'm going to go ahead and blend in some yellow with that to create an orange section. The most important thing about this is to work quickly so that all the borders are still wet, because if it's dry, you won't get a good blend. So while my yellow border is still wet, I'm going to grab my blue and I'm just going to mix it in to get the green. Finally, pull that blue all the way over to the pink and then blend them together using water to make the purple. Remember that this doesn't have to look perfect. It'll look cooler when you're done if it's in a loose, blotchy little mess rather than if it's in neat, perfect little wedges. So just remember that when you're creating it. We're going to be using the pick scan to cut out a Froyo shape, and we're going to be stamping out onto the white paper only, and then we're going to just copy it onto the pink paper. So to position our Froyo, I've got the stencil, and I'm going to make sure that in that little dent, there's going to be 3 of the little scallops. I'm also going to make sure that that little point in the center is in the center, and it's not off center or anything like that. I'm going to draw in the point and I'm going to draw in the top box. So now I've got my white paper ready and I've got my Froyo stamp, and I'm just going to use my ink and I'm going to stamp it. You want to make sure that the Froyo part itself, not the bowl, doesn't cross that center point, and it shouldn't go more than a little bit above the top of the box that we drew. So it needs to go between the top of the box and the center point. Don't worry about the bowl, because the bowl and the center point, it doesn't really matter that much. Now I've got my other stamp set and I'm going to be stamping out the pedestal onto Bristle Smooth. Then I'm going to use my pick scan sheet to upload them onto the silhouette. I'm going to select the trace area and select both my Froyo, and I'm going to select my pedestal so that I have both of them, and then I'm just going to trace the outer edge. Next, I'm going to take my rectangle tool and create a rectangle of any shape or size, it doesn't really matter, and then I'm going to head over to the transform slide and the scale button, and I'm going to make the width 3.75 and I'm going to make the height 5 to match my die cut. This won't work if it's not aligned properly, so make sure that you're very careful about aligning the rectangle to the die. Once you've adjusted it, I'm going to take my Froyo and I'm going to put it on offset. I'm going to do offset as 0.15 to make it a very small amount of offset. For the pedestal, I'm going to give it my usual offset of 0.025. Finally, I'm going to group them together by first clicking the Froyo, then holding Shift while clicking the rectangle. And I'm just going to copy it and then I'm going to paste it. Then, while making sure they're still grouped, I'm going to drag it over to my pink rectangle and I'm going to align it properly. Once you're finished, go ahead and delete the rectangles. Then go ahead and erase the pencil. So now I have popped out my Froyo from my cutout and I'm going to just separate the bowl from the Froyo top by just using a pair of scissors. It doesn't really matter if it's perfect, just go ahead and cut off that Froyo top. Then go ahead and color in your bowl and your stand. I'm making my stand yellow. So now I've got my rainbow reveal wheel and my small circle and a brad, and I'm just going to put the brad through both. It doesn't matter whether you put the bump on the top or whether you put the bump on the bottom. In these next few shots, I tried it both ways to make sure that both give you the same result, and they do. So just if you put the legs on the front, make sure they won't show. Next, go ahead and attach the colored paper to the white. So now I've got my back panel and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before and I'm going to position it so that 3 scallops are visible. Then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to outline the scallops. You don't have to do all of them. I did just to make sure that this is extra accurate, but it doesn't really matter. Just do enough so that you are comfortable with putting it in the right place. Next, put foam tape on the back of the small circle and then stick it down in your scallop outline. Next, I've got my Froyo stamp ready again and I've got a small square of acetate. I'm going to be using StazOn to stamp this because it is made to stay onto slick material like acetate. You'll want to stamp it near the middle so that you have room on all the borders to put down some tape because we're going to be taping it to our front panel. Position it so the Froyo is visible through the window. For this next part, if you put the bowl in the shape, then you wouldn't be able to put it on top of the pedestal. So instead, I'm going to take some glue and I'm going to glue the bottom of the bowl to the top of the pedestal using some very strong glue. Then I'm just going to go ahead and glue the whole thing on so that the bowl is still in the same place, there's just a pedestal underneath it. Going back to my back panel, I'm going to put a layer of foam tape around the whole thing, and then I'm going to put a second layer on it so that everything is supported. Before I stick the whole thing together, I'm just going to test it to make sure it works. Depending on your paper, you might need to have a third layer, but I did not in this case. Then tape the whole thing to the card base. Next, I've got some blue paper that is the same color as the one I put on my reveal wheel, and I'm just going to cut out a thank you sentiment from it. Next, I'm going to use my stamp set again, and I'm going to pick out a sentiment. I'm going to line it up onto my stamping block and make sure that it's really straight. Then I'm going to use my ink, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp it onto the same paper. Next, I'm going to use my craft knife to create a little sentiment strip. I'm going to be using a ruler to make sure that the margins on both sides are completely equal. And for our last step, go ahead and glue everything together in the way that you want it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a rainbow Froyo reveal wheel card. I adore these types of cards because it's just so much fun to spin it and just see how all the colors change together, and I love it, and I hope you guys did too. As always, don't forget to leave a like down below and subscribe for more tutorials. Stay crafty till next time!